Hey, all, Scott here, inviting you to check out Modern Times Magazine at moderntimesmagazine.com. It's a great little independent publication out of Phoenix, Arizona, featuring unique views on economics, politics, foreign policy, sports, and music, with great art scene coverage and fiction writing as well. That's Modern Times Magazine at moderntimesmagazine.com. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. And if you take a look at the front page of antiwar.com today, you'll see this piece by Scott McConnell in the American Conservative magazine after Kerry's failure. And I know you're asking, which failure, Scott Horton? Well, Scott McConnell is on the line to tell us which one he's referring to. Welcome back to the show. Scott, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well, thanks.
Very good, very good. Happy to hear it. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And, of course, I'm just screwing around here. The failure in question, the most recent major one. Well, I don't know the most recent because Ukraine's an ongoing thing. But you're talking about the collapse of the peace talks in Palestine.
John Kerry, I think I supported John Kerry's efforts on this. I didn't think much would come of them. But, John Kerry is, I think, been awful in Ukraine and has acted like a neoconservative, but in the Mideast he has acted like a standard American diplomat who thinks that the best chance for peace and self-determination and as close as you can get to justice in Israel-Palestine is a two-state solution. And he invested a great deal of time and effort and energy and was willing to quite publicly call out Israeli leaders and, really tried to push Israel to say, to allow a Palestinian state on the West Bank. Mm-hmm. And he came up against that the Israelis kept building settlements and the Israelis kept building side issues. And finally, he and his negotiating team, which included a lot of kind of Israel lobby type negotiators. Figures who would, like Martin Indyk, who had been involved in the peace process for many, many years, and had always been interpreted as being very pro-Israel and described in some instances as Israel's lawyers. But they are people who, to some extent, believe in a two-state solution, believe it's better for Israel, obviously better for the Palestinians, and better for the United States. And they just couldn't get it done because Israel wouldn't budge. Israel has a government now which openly wants, all of Palestine and just wants to either disperse the Palestinians or put them into Banistan's or just wants nothing, doesn't even conceive of any scenario in which they should have any justice or self-determination. And I think Kerry came to realize that. So it ends like a big process that started in the early 90s with the Oslo process, kind of ends with a whimper, but I think it's pretty clearly over now.
Mm. Well, and when you say that, what you mean by that, the Oslo process, that means the negotiations toward eventual two-state solution. That's what they've been working on since the early 90s, and this was the last try for that. In other words, Annapolis and Camp David and et cetera, going back. Now it's basically widely recognized that we're not going to even try that anymore. That's over. This was it, and now it's falling apart.
Well, the Americans aren't going to try it anymore, and it's kind of acknowledged. The American perception was that as long as they made Israel feel secure, then Israel would feel secure enough to make concessions. So the United States was always very, very nice to Israel and always offering it. Well, if you do this, we'll give you more weapons, we'll give you more money, we'll give you, this, that, and the other thing. And I wonder if that basic perception of the psychological dynamic between Israel and the United States is incorrect. The other possibility, which I think may happen, and I kind of alluded to at the end of the piece, is that Europe will take a bigger role, but instead of sort of giving Israel more carrots, they may bit by bit be willing to use sticks. Israel has a much closer economic relationship with Europe than the United States because it's nearer. Thousands of Israelis go to vacation to Europe all the time. So, Europe can just start making that sort of say, you want to keep holding the West Bank? All right. Every time an Israeli comes here, we won't give him a visa. We'll ask him to ask under oath in an official form whether he served in the occupying forces on the West Bank, and maybe start denying visas, or maybe start putting in trade restrictions on products which come from the West Bank and things like that, and just begin to make Israel feel it's not getting a free ride anymore with the occupation. Beginning a sanctions regime. And that might make a difference. And maybe the Europeans have the gumption to do that. I mean, it's clearly the United States does not. I mean, I think Obama and Kerry clearly understood what the right thing to do was, but they didn't have the political clout to do it. They would have to face down entirely the Israel lobby in the United States, and which includes a major part of the fundraising apparatus of the Democratic Party. And Obama wasn't willing to basically blow up his presidency and his party to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you mentioned how hard Kerry worked on this, and I got to say, I've supported it too. Out of all of his policies, I guess I support the negotiations with Iran as well. And really, in both cases, I've been impressed by how hard he's worked to get it done. Although, as Phil Giraldi reported in the American Conservative, in fact, that really the deal with Iran was already worked out secretly in Oman. Mm-hmm. Kerry's kind of window dressing there. But on this one, though, I totally agree with you. Sorry for that diversion and tangent. On this one, though, it does seem like he's taken this very seriously. And, in fact, I've sort of thought, why? It doesn't seem to make sense why he would try so hard, because it seems like he must have been as aware as you and I that the Netanyahu government and his coalition, which includes many ministers to the right of Netanyahu, that they never meant to give up the West Bank. Even if they ever did give up the West Bank as a Palestinian state, it wouldn't really be a state by any other definition of the term that anyone else in the world recognizes. It would still just be, occupation, maybe a little bit lighter. I don't know if even occupation light. Mm-hmm. So what was the point? Was Kerry actually naive, or was he just trying to demonstrate that, okay, one last good faith attempt kind of a thing? Or what do you think?
Well, I think he may have been wanting to. I mean, Netanyahu for a number of years has said that he favored a Palestinian state. And he didn't. I mean, he said that to American audiences. He said different things to Israeli audiences, and different things in Hebrew than in English. But there was a sense of maybe Kerry felt that you put enough pressure on, you can, make him take it to his word, and figuring that Netanyahu maybe feels ambivalently. Maybe Netanyahu fears bad relations with the United States, or maybe Netanyahu's coalition would collapse. Ultimately, I don't think Kerry had a lot of support from Barack Obama on this. I mean, I don't think Obama wanted to have. I think Obama cares more about a deal with Iran than having a major confrontation with Israel. And it's quite possibly that, politics being the art of the possible, that you can't do both. Mm-hmm. That we can have a negotiation which eliminates the possibility of war with Iran, and just say and tell the Israelis, all right, you've made your choice, you've made your bed, now lie in it. That's essentially what Obama said in his trip to Israel last year. I mean, he talked to Israeli students, and he made the case that it was in their interest that the Palestinians have self-determination, and that it was in their interest that they not become an apartheid state. But he also said, it's up to you, meaning we, America, aren't going to force you to do what's in your interest. And so that means that, Kerry could use words, but there was no question that America was going to cut off aid to Israel or begin to, support United Nations resolutions against Israel and things like that.
Well, Andrew Coburn reported in Harper's that he had sources that said a lot of this was personal between Obama and Kerry, that, everybody recognized, as you're saying, that America would have to really push hard to make Israel do something, to get them to do it, threaten to withhold aid or something severe like that, and that Obama was certainly not willing to go that far even if it would work, if John Kerry was going to get all the credit and go down in history as the guy that worked the deal and not him. And These guys are politicians. That sounded
that's
plausible enough to me. What did you make of that?
Sure. I mean, Andrew Coburn has sources in Washington, and that sounds possible. I mean, that politicians have big egos.
Yeah, it's funny. And, it's the reverse, isn't it, of the policy of 2009, where he started off saying, hey, let's work out a deal, Islamic Republic of Iran. Happy New Year. Come on, let's work it out. And then he ended up basically sabotaging his own outreach to Iran on their nuclear program in exchange for a real settlement freeze. And we're going to, get back to work on talks on a two-state solution. And then, of course, they didn't freeze anything. And he had just scotched his whole Iran negotiations, his early Iran negotiations, for nothing.
Yeah, well, the Iranians didn't, I have to admit, didn't make it easy with their election and the crackdown on the parties and forces which may well have won the election. I mean, it's hard to know. So it was hard. It's hard to get everything lined up in a row. Obama was clearly opening up to Iran, but Iran was, not in a position then to say yes in a way that Obama could get a settlement passed.
Well, and as Ray McGovern reminds us, the Israeli Mossad was dressing up as CIA and hiring Jandala to murder generals and officers inside Iran in October of 2009, right in the midst of make it or break it on the talks.
There's been a lot of state-sponsored terrorism sponsored by Israel, and previously by the United States and Iran.
All right, I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop right there, but we'll pick it up on that point on the other side of this break with Scott McConnell from the American Conservative magazine, theamericanconservative.com. After Kerry's failure is the latest. Hey, y'all, Scott here. First, I want to take a second to thank all the show's listeners, sponsors, and supporters for helping make the show what it is. I literally couldn't do it without you. And now I want to tell you about the newest way to help support the show. Whenever you shop at Amazon.com, stop by ScottHorton.org first, and just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page. That way, the show will get a kickback from Amazon's end of the sale. It won't cost you an extra cent. And it's not just books. Amazon.com sells just about everything in the world, except cars, I think. So whatever you need, they've got it. Just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page at ScottHorton.org, or go to ScottHorton.org/Amazon. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. I'm at ScottHorton.org and APSRadioNews.com. Talking with Scott McConnell from the American Conservative magazine. He's a founding editor there. A former neoconservative, I think he would have me say. Now running around with the paleos here, theamericanconservative.com after Kerry's failure. And I'm sorry I had to interrupt you there with that hard break, Scott, but and we were kind of off topic anyway, but where we left off was Iran and Jandala, and I think you were making sort of a general statement about Israel, the United States, and other states using terrorist groups in order to ruin negotiations, kind of as a general principle of how business is done. Yeah.
I did want to get, one point I'll make in the piece, which I want to reemphasize, is this is the first time I think that American diplomats, even speaking off the record, have explicitly blamed Israel for the breakdown in negotiations. This is a marked departure from what happened in 2000 and also in 2008 and the various other ones. So it's a turning of a chapter, which I think will be remembered. It's for people to speak to a dovish Israeli journalist and say, basically, the Israelis, ruin this negotiation by continuing to appropriate land and build settlements. I think it's a significant thing that happened.
Right. You link in your article to this piece in Ynet, Inside the Talks Failure. U.S. officials open up. And I guess this is sort of behind Kerry's poof statement, where he was kind of going through the chronology, explaining what was going on. And I think the poof came right after he listed the announcement of, was it 14,000 new settlements to be built?
Here's, it's like the nitty-gritty can get kind of boring, but there's a...
No, go ahead.
The quotes are fairly significant. This is an American diplomat, unnamed, talking about Abbas. He said, Abbas agreed to a demilitarized a demilitarized state, the Palestinian leader. He agreed to a border outlined so 80% of the settlers could continue living in Israeli territory. He agreed for Israel to keep the security-sensitive areas for 5 years on the Jordan Valley, and then the United States would take over. He accepted the fact that in the Israeli perception, the Palestinians would never be trustworthy. He also agreed that Jewish neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, i.e. occupied Jerusalem, would remain under Israeli sovereignty. And he agreed that the return of Palestinians to Israel would depend on Israeli willingness. Israel won't be flooded with refugees, he promised. I mean, this is the most accommodating Palestinian leader that the Israelis are ever going to have and are ever going to be dealing with. And, I mean, he's, paid a great price in terms of his own popularity for his readiness to deal with Israel and to try to meet Israeli concerns. And basically, the American diplomats are saying that Israel will not take yes for an answer. And it's never been so explicit. And I probably could have hyped the novelty of that in the article more. But it's really there, and I think it's very significant.
Well, now, of course, it was just a convenient talking point for the Israelis to say, and I guess their partisans to say, oh, well, now here the PLA wants to cozy up to Hamas and go ahead and create that coalition government after all. And so that was why the negotiations broke down. And I guess, like you're saying, the truth was obvious enough that spin wasn't going to really, become the official narrative at this point. And yet it did seem pretty convenient. I wonder why. What was the point of that? Was there a specific point of them announcing that when they announced it? Because it just made them look bad, gave Netanyahu one more half-truth to spout,
That would be beyond me. But if the Palestinian Authority did not have a deal with Hamas, Israelis could say, well, what's the point of having a deal with the Palestinian Authority when they don't represent all Palestinians?
Of course.
When
they're the ones that engineered the election that led to Hamas coming to power in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Hamas it's part of Palestinian society. I think there are a lot of elements. The overall dynamic is that the Palestinians want to have better lives, and that includes Hamas too. And Hamas is somewhat divided, but they're perfectly willing to take a two-state solution too. If you kind of go deep enough into their rhetoric, they may sort of want to hide their readiness to make concessions with kind of bluster, but they're they are accepting of a two-state solution also.
Right.
Hamas didn't exist. It's kind of like invented by Israeli Secret Service during the first Intifada. It's like they were worried about a secular liberation movement that was gaining more and more Palestinian friends in the West. So the Israelis started giving money and stuff to Palestinian radical Muslims, and the idea that this would divide the Palestinians and make them less presentable.
Right. Yeah. If Hamas didn't exist, they'd have to invent them. Oh, yeah.
Well, they did. Yeah.
Right. And then, as Ray McGovern likes to point out, when they betrayed Yassin and finally assassinated him, that was what led to the Fallujah uprising in the Iraq occupation. Then the American clampdown on Fallujah was, knocked down a whole chain of dominoes, and somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people killed in the civil war that followed. That was a huge thing, and a lot of that, tinderbox was lit by the assassination of Yassin, the guy that they had hired to build Hamas for them in the first place. Lord have mercy.
Ray is right.
Yep. All right, well, so what now? You still have how many million people live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem?
I think there's about 4.5, and then another 750,000 in Gaza. There's about an equal number of Palestinians and Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews in the whole territory. So I don't know what will happen now. I can concoct an optimistic scenario that Europe will begin to say to Israel, look, you can have a peaceful settlement, and perhaps Israel can become part of the EU, perhaps Palestine can become part of the EU, you can divide the territory, the water resources in somewhat fair way that makes sense, or you can be increasingly isolated from Western Europe and just, go off in your South Africa direction. And the United States has not been willing to say that, and maybe France, Britain, Germany will. But that's the most optimistic scenario I can come up with, that some combination of European diplomacy and BDS will pressure Israel. But you can come up with lots of more pessimistic and bloodier scenarios as well.
Well, so what about a secular binational state where it's not a Jewish state, but it's a democracy and all of that,
Sure.
Western-style democracy. That's how it's supposed to work, right?
I don't know. I don't know how you get there. In South Africa, there were actually elements of commonality between the white apartheid rulers and the blacks, the indigenous blacks, that don't quite exist. I mean, the Israelis don't have that mindset. They don't even have the beginnings of it. So, and also their military position is, probably more dominant. I don't see how you get there. I don't think that's a bad outcome. I'm not, completely committed to that there has to be a Jewish state in Palestine. It seems to me not a terrible thing necessarily, but not a necessary thing either. But I don't know how you get to a binational democratic state. I mean, these are, generally speaking, when you have different ethnicities who are in great, deep civil war type of conflict with one another, the outcome is dividing the states, not unifying them. I mean, that seems to be the general historical pattern.
Right. All right. Well, I guess, like you're saying, there's the European governments and then there's the BDS movement, and the Americans have basically abandoned, under Obama's leadership, progressive minority leadership, has basically abandoned really the American policy of seeking a two-state solution now, since he wasn't willing to back Kerry up on this. And so it's a brave new world now.
Yep, it's a brave new world.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Scott. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it as always, Scott. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That's Scott McConnell. He's a founding editor over there at the American Conservative magazine, theamericanconservative.com. The article is The American... no, it's not. That's the thing. Yeah. After Kerry's failure. Phone records, financial and location data, Prism, Tempora, X-Keyscore, Boundless Informant. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for offnow.org. Now, here's the deal. Due to the Snowden revelations, we have a great opportunity for a short period of time to get some real rollback of the national surveillance state. Now, they're already trying to tire us by introducing fake reforms in the Congress. And the courts, they betrayed their sworn oaths to the Constitution and Bill of Rights again and again, and can in no way be trusted to stop the abuses for us. We've got to do it ourselves. How? We nullify it at the state level. It's still not easy, but the Off Now project of the 10th Amendment Center has gotten off to a great start. I mean it. There's real reason to be optimistic here. They've gotten their model legislation introduced all over the place, in state after state. I've lost count, more than a dozen. You're always wondering, yeah, but what can we do? Here's something important, something that can work if we do the work. Get started cutting off the NSA support in your state. Go to offnow.org. Oh, John Kerry's Mideast peace talks have gone nowhere. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. U.S. military and financial support for Israel's permanent occupations of the West Bank and Gaza Strip is immoral, and it threatens national security by helping generate terrorist attacks against our country. And face it, it's bad for Israel, too. Without our unlimited support, they would have much more incentive to reach a lasting peace with their neighbors. It's past time for us to make our government stop making matters worse. Help support CNI at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here. Are you a libertarian and or peacenik? Live in North America? If you want, you could hire me to come and give a speech to your group. I'm good on the terror war and intervention, civil liberties stuff, blaming Woodrow Wilson for everything bad in the world, Iran, central banking, political realignment, and, well, everything. I can teach markets to liberals and peace to the right. Just watch me. Check out scotthorton.org/speeches for some examples and email me scott@scotthorton.org for more information. See you there. You hate government, one of them libertarian types, or maybe you just can't stand the president, gun grabbers, or warmongers. Me too. That's why I invented LibertyStickers.com. Well, Rick owns it now, and I didn't make up all of them, but still, if you're driving around and want to tell everyone else how wrong their politics are, there's only one place to go. LibertyStickers.com has got your bumper covered. Left, right, libertarian, empire, police, state, founders quote, central banking. Yes, bumper stickers about central banking. Lots of them. And, well, everything that matters. LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck.